Well, I'd like to welcome you to the Medical Marijuana and Wellness webinar series. Tonight's subject is anxiety, stress, and medical marijuana, kind of a very popular subject and one of the main reasons why people use medical marijuana. Uh, I'd like to mention that tonight's webinar will be live streamed on Facebook. And so what we'll be able to do is you'll be able to get a copy of this after the seminar, after the webinar. You'll get an email that has a copy of a link to the video, the presentation, all the notes that we have, and then also you'll be able to see it on Facebook as well. So thank you very much for joining us. This is the last seminar in the Candid Chat series for the summer, or for the summer series. Next week we start a new seminar series, which begins with edibles, and we'll send you an email to let you know with that schedule. It'll be running all the way through the end of November with some pretty interesting topics like edible, terpenes, sleep, sleep management, and things like that. So I'd like to begin the webinar by mentioning we have an excellent co-host, someone I've done a couple of webinars with, and someone who's got a lot of experience in the medical cannabis field, as well as with anxiety and stress, or helping patients with anxiety and stress, Alex Ford. Alex, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. Always a pleasure to be here with you on these MMAWs. I'm coming to you here from Central Florida. I've been working for Trulieve since October 2017, so I've seen a thing or two in the Florida cannabis space, and I also suffer from anxiety and stress myself. So this is going to be a perfect webinar for me, I think.
It's right up your alley, as they say.
Oh,
Not to mention you work with a number of patients that also have had anxiety and stress. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. That's one of the most common conditions that we see here in Florida, that patients are looking for cannabis to treat.
Super. Well, let's get into anxiety and stress. I think really, if we're going to talk about it, we need to talk about what it is. And I think one of the things that's interesting is stress is something that is usually a physical or a mental response to an external cause. In other words, something happens and it puts us under stress. And that could be a physical, it could be something where we're challenged physically. It might be something where we're challenged mentally, where abuse, for example, falls into that category. And so, but it's different. What's different about anxiety, stress, between stress and anxiety, is stress is something that is a response to a condition, to a case, where anxiety is something that's ongoing. It's something that escalates. Stress helps to escalate that response. In other words, anxiety is something where it doesn't really go away. And I say that that's important because people that live with anxiety and stress, they're kind of always kind of anxious, and they're always in a kind of a mood that's there. Alex, from your perspective, what does anxiety do for you? I mean, how do you know you're anxious, and how did you find it out?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things that's first off, kind of hard for people to talk about and be open about. So that's kind of the first hurdle. But for me personally, I noticed elevated heart rate, a little bit of perspiration, and a little bit of kind of like feeling in the pit of my stomach, I guess, or weight on my chest. So that's how I know that I'm getting anxious, and it definitely increases with the amount of stress that I have going on as well.
Yeah, and I think that what's interesting is it really causes, it's a lot of factors that have to do with like your brain chemistry. It has to do with a lot of life events. It's something that most people have experienced at some point in time. There's a lot of studies, of course, that are out there, and it's interesting that there's one of the studies points out that 31% of the adults in the United States have experienced anxiety in one way, shape, or form, whether they've recognized it or not. They've been anxious at some point in time. And so I'm trying to point out, with 264 million people worldwide diagnosed or having stress or anxiety, you're not alone. A lot of people who are anxious think that they're kind of alone, and it's a condition, and it's not. It's something that goes on quite a bit with a number of different people. I have a number of friends who suffer from this condition, and some of them that we've helped with medical cannabis, which has been really helpful. Stress is something that's interesting because I've worked. I retired now, somewhat retired, I should say, but I worked in high tech for a number of years. And stress was the name of the game in that business, because things changed so much that you always had deadlines. And of course, when I was working for public companies, you had quarterly deadlines, things like that. And that you see people that end up getting things like chest pains, they get skin rashes, people react to it. A lot of times they have loss of sleep. So these are very real symptoms that people have to very real problems that are out there. Everyone has anxiety and stress in some order at some point in time in their life. And so again, I don't want people to feel that they're strange because this happens or they're different. You're in the crowd. Let's put it that way. And so the question becomes, what can we do about it? You know, what is it, and what can we do about it? So let's talk about cannabis and stress and anxiety. That's the subject tonight. What's interesting is the researchers have gone out and they found something called the endocannabinoid system. And we'll talk a little bit more about it later in the webinar. We'll actually explain a little bit about what it is. But what is interesting is that the endocannabinoid system in our body helps us regulate our anxieties, our fears, our stress responses, our behavior to a lot of stressful stimuli. In other words, this is how your body controls itself. And medical cannabis and cannabis itself works like hand in glove with the endocannabinoid system to be able to address a lot of those symptoms. And we'll talk more about that also. What's interesting too is that a lot of individuals that suffer from PTS or from chronic pain also will find that a lot of the symptoms that they have, it creates a stressor and it creates a lot of anxiety from those particular conditions. So it's something that's again, found very commonly in a lot of different situations. And there's a number of terpenes also that have found that are involved in cannabis, which we'll talk about during this webinar. We'll talk actually to detail them, that are actually have an anti-anxiety effect that help us quite a bit. And if you're wondering, is this stuff real? Are we a couple of crazy guys in a corner? The answer is no. There's a study that was published in 2020, and it talks about the endocannabinoid anxiety and how it's in its connection to basically our brain functions. So that'll be provided in the resources that we provide after the webinar, that if somebody wants to read that. But this comes from a lot of scientific fact and a lot of scientific evidence that's out there. Now, let's talk about CBD and THC. And this, Alex, is something that I think is important. A lot of times people think, well, what I'll do is I'll take a high dose of THC or I'll take a high dose of CBD. What's interesting is if you take a high dose of THC, what it can actually do is it can cause anxiety. In other words, it can help bring it on. So what you really want to take a look at is using lower doses for anxiety, especially of THC that's out there. They've also found that if you use CBD, what happens is that CBD helps to reduce the amount of anxiety and stress that you have. And actually what it does, it counteracts a lot of the anxiety creating and the euphoric effects that you find in THC. Alex, what's been your experience with the relationships of CBD, THC, and anxiety and stress?
I think my experiences mirror your explanation almost perfectly. You know, it is important to point out that although there are lots of different cannabinoids that we're going to get into a little bit later, THC and CBD are the main ones that people are familiar with, but not everyone's aware that THC is actually a stimulant. So, you know, with stress and anxiety, if you're more stimulated, if your heart rate's, you know, being increased, then it's going to be a lot more likely for you to experience stress and anxiety. So that's one of the main factors. And then also, yes, CBD does counteract a lot of the euphoric potential of the THC, and it does that by blocking those THC receptors without activating them. So that's a very important kind of, I guess, stepping stone or fail-safe to keep in mind. I mean, the mantra of this industry is to start low and go slow, and especially with anxiety and stress, it's really important because you don't want to, you know, trigger anxiety or stress or exacerbate it. So that's why it's really important to, you know, start with CBD first, you know, ramp it up, and then start to incorporate THC in smaller doses, like you mentioned, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in that in order to have cannabis really work for you, you got to find what you call your sweet spot. And we're going to talk more about that again later on in the webinar. But really, the mixture between THC and CBD, and also your own biology, how your body reacts and how your body accepts those things is really important. Once you find that sweet spot, it works great. I know my wife suffered from anxiety and stress, and we've kind of found her sweet spot, and it's made life a lot better for her. Prior to that, again, the anxiousness and again, from not just stress, but just the anxiousness was something that was uncomfortable for her. So finding that sweet spot is important. We'll talk more about that. But what's important to walk away from this slide understanding is higher doses of CBD appear to reduce a lot of anxiety. And that's what's important. And so it's not just a THC driven response. It's also, you just look at the CBD, and also we need to understand your tolerance to CBD. You know, how much CBD you can take, and that type of thing. Now, let's talk about the alternatives. I know that a lot of people have, in talking to different folks, there are different what I call pharma alternatives that are out there. You know, people think about Prozac, for example, and people talk about the different warfarin and that type of thing. A lot of the pharma approaches to this are really designed to be short term, and they have some very negative effects on your body. And what's interesting is all the different pharma approaches to this, although they are effective short term, they're not made to be used long term, which if you have anxiety is something that, again, goes on long term, not short term. So they don't really become a good option for you, although it's the only option that you have from a pharma standpoint. And one of the things you got to be careful of is if you have, for example, you got to, if you're going to be you're also taking blood thinners or something like that, it's important that you work with your doctor to figure out the right formula of those blood thinners and also medical cannabis. You can take cannabis if you are on blood thinners, but again, it's a matter of just adjusting the dosing, and your medical marijuana doctor, as well as your doctor as well as your medical doctor, will help you be able to get that formula correct, to be able to help in that particular situation. I just want people to understand that when you compare it, and again, I'm not going to go through every line on the slide, when you compare it against the alternatives, medical cannabis doesn't hurt you, it won't kill you, it doesn't have any negative side effects, and it's not addicting. And so a lot of that has to do with just being a better alternative than the pharma alternatives that are out there. Your thoughts on that? Alex?
My thoughts would be exactly the same. I mean, I've, personally have some experience with some of these that you have listed on the slides. And, personally, my experience of side effects, that were, I guess, few and far between, inconsistent, were just a lot higher than the cannabis. I didn't take any one of these for more than a couple months because I didn't really like it, whereas cannabis, it's more as you can, kind of have more control over it and take it as you need it. And it just has much less side effects and interactions.
Yeah. One of the things I didn't do, and I'm remiss for not doing that, is if you have any questions, if you look at the bottom of your screen down here, you'll see a little Q&A button. If you have any questions, please feel free to click on that button and drop your questions in there. I see there's some questions that are in the chat, and we will answer those questions that are in the chat. But if you drop them into the Q&A, it makes it a little easier. We tend to monitor the Q&A more than we do the chat, and it makes it easier for us to just pick up the questions. And we're here to answer your questions, and we want to get the answers to you. I just want to make sure I don't miss your question. That's all. So if you could do that, that would be really great. Let's move on a little bit. I want to thank everybody, first of all. So we're going to take a break. We're going to get into the whole cannabis part of this in this next section and explain how it works and what the different alternatives are. But I want to thank everybody for showing up for the webinar. We want you to know that there's a site called Marijuana Aware, which you use to register for this event. And what's going to happen is all the previous events that have been out there, the videos are posted, and the information, the presentations are also posted. We also have what they call a patient education brochure, patient information brochure. That's really a kind of something to help you step-by-step guide for medical cannabis, and not only just to get your card, but once you have your card, what you can use to be able to you can use it to be able to help it make it a better experience, and you have access to that. Please feel free to do that. And also, you can get 10% off if you don't have a card, a medical marijuana card. If you use the MMAW code, you can go to MMTC of Florida. There's a phone number there and a website, and you'll be able to get an appointment and a discount. And then if you want to buy CBD products, we have a site called My Botanical Wellness. Again, use MMAW10, and that'll give you a 10% discount on any of the CBD products that you buy. And for Trulieve, if you want to get medical cannabis products, you'll be able to obviously get your card and use Trulieve, and you have a number of discounts that are available, and you have a slide at the end of the deck that's going to detail that, right, Alex?
Correct.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. We want to make sure that you get some benefits from that. And by the way, you will be getting a copy of this slide presentation, and this will be detailed in the follow-up to you, so you don't have to necessarily write all these down that are out there. Let's talk about the endocannabinoid system. This is something that a lot of people have never heard of, and if somebody has, that's great. It was actually something that was found When they started studying medical cannabis, they actually found the endocannabinoid system. And what they found out is it works lock and key quite a bit. It works very closely with your body. The endocannabinoid system, if you look really closely here, you'll see the little receptors that go throughout your body, and there's CB1 receptors and there's CB2 receptors. And this was something that was kind of a new revelation, although it was really found it was first identified in the 1940s. What's interesting is it really didn't come to light, in its application and how to use it didn't come to light until really the 70s and the 80s with Dr. Raphael Mechoulam when he was studying medical cannabis. What's interesting about the endocannabinoid system is it works lock and key with your system to be able to control things like your memory, your appetite, inflammation, your immune system. This is how your body controls itself. And CBD, CBN, THC all fit and work with those receptors. They're almost like they're very compatible. And it's interestingly enough, we'll explain that your body actually produces a lot of endocannabinoids to be able to manage itself when you have pain, for example. So again, endocannabinoid system, which is comprised of CB1 and CB2 receptors, really are the factors that control your health and really control your safety as you go along. CB1 receptors are primarily found in the brain and the nervous system. They're the light receptors that you see here. CB2 receptors are primarily found in your organs, and also associated with your immune system. So you can see that throughout your body, this is how your body basically controls itself. And when you have a problem, your body produces the endocannabinoids and actually sends out that remedy to that particular part of your body. Now, when you take a look at the cannabis plant, and I put this picture up because when we talk about cannabis and we talk about medical cannabis, especially, what we're really talking about are these little trichomes that you see right here, these little things right here. This is what it's all about. This is what the companies like Trulieve are really looking for to produce the medicine that's out there. This is what a typical cannabis plant looks like. And if you blow it up, this is what the actual trichomes look out over here. You got some comments on that, Alex, about the plant and the trichomes?
Without a doubt. First off, I think, it's very beautiful imagery. It's always neat to see these plants grow and see the microscopic images of the trichomes. And that's really where the medicine is going to be concentrated, where the cannabinoids and the terpenes, where you're going to find the highest density of it. So that's basically where all the magic happens, and where it comes from. And over the maturing process, production process, they might change colors, get a little darker, but all that can impact the final product and the type of medicinal benefits you receive from it. But very, very cool, beautiful stuff to watch grow, without a doubt.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, we're getting a lot of questions, and I appreciate that. But we're going to answer a lot of the questions at the end of the webinar. We have a couple of them that apply to some slides. We'll probably throw those in. But we are seeing the questions, and thank you very much. Please keep them coming. We're here to answer those questions for you. So tell me, let's break down cannabis. What's in it? The major components are CBD and THC. What are they, Alex?
Well, that's a great question. So those are the most common cannabinoids that are isolated from the cannabis plants. And I like to kind of relate them in terms of common pain relievers that everyone kind of is familiar with. So CBD is going to be primarily very strong anti-inflammatory, analgesic. So that's going to be very similar to like an aspirin or an ibuprofen type product, whereas your THC is going to be your stronger pain reliever. That's more like an opioid alternative that can come with some intoxicating euphoric effects. Now, what's obviously unique about these compounds is that the CBD is anti-psychoactive, anti-euphoric. So in the slide we saw a few slides ago with the different receptors throughout the body, you can see that although the dark blue receptors, the light blue ones are the THC receptors, the CBD can fit into those receptors without activating them. So it blocks THC from being able to, fit in there and then activate it and then produce that feeling of euphoria. So very, very neat. And then also, you're able to kind of dictate your own ratios and control your own ratios, and that can drastically change the effects that you receive from any given products.
Right. Well, if you take a look at the cannabis plant itself, really there's two varieties of it. When I got involved in the medical cannabis field 8 years ago, everything was sativa and indica. Of course, things have kind of changed now with the hybrids, but what's a sativa and what's an indica, Alex?
Yeah, great question. So beyond cannabinoids like THC and CBD, there's a few other components that we've kind of touched on, known as terpenes. Terpenes are just flavor and scent compounds found all throughout nature: fruits, vegetables, flowers, plants, and even some insects. They're in high concentrations in things like essential oils. And at the molecular level, these scent and flavor compounds are the same, whether they're in cannabis or a flower or a fruit. Now, like Mark was mentioning, this is kind of an outdated generalization, but it's still kind of the best thing for new patients to start to kind of digest the differences and what they can expect from different strains. So first things first, you got your sativas and indicas, okay? And if you haven't heard this yet, I'm sure you'll hear it 100 times. Indicas put you into couch. So those are going to be primarily your nighttime strains. They're going to be better for relaxation and sleep. Your sativa strains are going to be on the opposite end of the spectrum. They're going to be more your uplifting, stimulating, more cerebral type of strains. Now, again, everything that we have kind of present day is technically a hybrid, but it's still valuable to kind of distinguish them this way. And there's also hybrid strains too that are going to fall somewhere in the middle on the spectrum. Now, certain strains can lean one way or the other, but they're still going to be kind of like a happy medium in between. And although, you know, again, it's just important to keep in mind that there's so much variables that you have to consider, that just because indicas do commonly put people into couch and put them to sleep, many people use indicas all throughout the day to help control their pain. So just keep that in mind. It's just general.
What's interesting is that as researchers have come along and as they've been really looking at how to develop medical cannabis products, you've been able to blend different strains. You've been able to blend together some sativa and indicas to what they call hybrids. So the hybrids are a mix of the sativa and the indicas. And really, most of the products today, in fact, I think someone told me it's very hard to find a pure cannabis sativa strain or pure cannabis indica strain, because they've all really been designed for, again, in the medical field, for different types of uses. And that's where the word hybrid comes into play. And we'll talk about later about the different strains that are available for anxiety and stress. And you'll find that they are almost all also hybrid, and they're what they call, as Alex was mentioning, sativa leaning, meaning they're energizing, or the indica leaning, meaning they're relaxing. And so you'll be able to know what the effect that it should have on your body. And of course, we'll talk about how you can actually measure that. More importantly, terpenes have really come forward. I think really in the last 5 years, Alex, I think that a lot of research has been done, and we found that terpenes are very, very important, especially in the medical cannabis field, to help people. Your thoughts on terpenes?
Yeah, they're definitely invaluable in terms of trying to generate the effects that you're going to get from a medical cannabis product, because they're synergistic and they work with the cannabinoids to really kind of fine tune the effects that you're going to receive. As you're first starting out, it's going to be a little bit overwhelming, to kind of try to digest all of this. But as you kind of get more experience, you'll start to find, similarities in different products in terms of effects. And then you'll also notice that they'll have similar terpenes as well. So once you get more familiar with, what cannabinoids work best for you and then what terpenes work best for you, then it's a lot easier to kind of find your sweet spot and find more products that really work well for you.
I know that when I first got involved in I use medical cannabis because I have 7 herniated discs in my neck and 2 in my back. Plus, I had the ambiance of a knee replacement surgery about 2.5 years ago. But when I first started using medical cannabis, which was about 4.5 years ago, I remember going into the dispensary. I had gone to the doctor, and the medical cannabis doctor, he'd made a recommendation. I went into the dispensary, and the dispensary had my recommendation. And I talked to them about my condition, and what they did was they said, here's the product that we think you should use. And I found that interesting, because if you go into a dispensary, you'll see a lot of products. And I was thinking, how do you know out of all these products which one to use? And on the first visit, I just kind of accepted what they were doing on blind faith. The second visit, I came back and said, how do you know? How do I know that product is going to work for my condition? And they said, it's very simple. It depends on the terpene profile. What we're able to do is we're able to look at what your condition is and we're able to match that to a terpene profile that's best to address your condition. And of course, that follows with the strain that's out there. And I think that's what's important to understand is this is very much a medicine. It's very much something that can be very much tailored to your particular condition, and it's something that's really available to you. And I think a lot of your bud tenders at Trulieve, they're really schooled in being able to do that match. Is that right, Alex?
Yeah, without a doubt. Especially, the more experience that anyone has in this space, the greater their ability is going to be to, land a patient on a better product. And what's cool about Trulieve is that we actually have virtual consultations, which only a few members at each store that are experienced and tenured, can take. And it's a 30-minute blocked out phone call or FaceTime in their schedule. So that's a great way to make sure that you get someone super knowledgeable as well.
Right. We'll talk about the consulting later on in the webinar, but that's a good point. One, people should understand that I'll talk about Trulieve specifically. If you have some questions about what products you should use, it's a free consultation, right, Alex? It's free. Is that correct?
No doubt. And you can take as many as you want, and you don't have to be a patient yet. And if you are a patient, they're still free, and you can still take as many as you want. You actually get to select the store that you get the consultation from, so you can start to get familiar with the faces and names there at that store too.
Right. And so it's important, I think, especially if you're starting out, or even if you've been using medical cannabis for a while, and it's not as effective or it's not getting the job done, go to the consultation. That's what they're there for. We're not trying to replace, and we're not trying to get in the way of the doctor. But what we are looking at doing is being able to take the recommendation from the doctor and being able to match it to the products that you should be using, at least the products from Trulieve in their particular consultations. One of the other things that's interesting is your body. Every person's body is really different. And so the interesting part about medical cannabis is that it isn't like take 2 pills and I'll see you in the morning, which is the pharma approach. That isn't the way it works, because the products are really tuned to your body. Every person's body has a different biology, and I liken it to alcohol. I have friends who have 1 drink and they're done for the night. I have other friends that drink the whole bottle and they're just getting going. Every person's metabolism in their body is different. My body and my metabolism is very different from my wife's, and the medical cannabis I use for my condition is very different from my wife's. My wife is she's very THC. She's very sensitive to that. Just a little bit of THC has a big effect on her body. So in her particular case, she's using believe it or not, either a 12-to-1 or a 20-to-1. But what I mean by that is she's using the product has 20 CBD to 1 THC in there to be able to address her particular condition. And that's really or 12 CBD to 1 THC to be able to help her quite a bit. And again, I liken it to alcohol. When you get involved in medical cannabis, the first thing you need to do is figure out what your tolerance is to CBD and THC, what works and what doesn't work for you. And you got to experiment with it a little bit. Again, like alcohol, some people like the light colored stuff, the gin and the vodkas. Some people like the dark colored stuff, the bourbons and the scotches. Some people like an umbrella in their drink, and some people like ice cubes, and some people like it straight. It's very much the same kind of thing. To get your dosing right is really important. And we'll talk a little bit about dosing at the end of the webinar. But when they say go low and go slow, what they're really saying is start with a 1-to-1. Try to figure out with a 1-to-1 ratio product, which you can get from, for example, from Trulieve. And then what you want to be able to do is take a little bit of it, take 25 milliliters, find out if it works, use that for a day or two, find out if that works. If you're not getting any effect from that, then up the amount you're taking to 50 milliliters, which is the second line on the eyedropper, and see if that works. And then if that doesn't work, try go up to the third line, which is 75 milliliters. When you start feeling any euphoric effect, that's when you want to back down. That's when you want to actually go from that point actually down, because now you know where your THC tolerance level is. Then what you can do is you can up the CBD side to be able to figure out, again, if it can really help you. In my wife's case, when we went to 50 milliliters, what happened was she got high. And so what we did, we backed it down to 25 milliliters, and we increased the amount of CBD, meaning we went from, instead of going from 1-to-1, we went to 4-to-1, 8-to-1, 12-to-1, 20-to-1. And we found that this began to work for her rather nicely. And your body will tell you. Listen to your body. You don't need a doctor. You don't need somebody out there explaining to you what's going on. Your body will tell you what works and doesn't work. And I think that's important. Alex, if someone's taking some cannabis and they start getting high, how do they counteract that high?
Well, they can counteract that just by consuming some CBD, whether it be orally, sublingually, or inhalation through maybe like a vape. Obviously, the inhalation is going to take effect a lot quicker, but it'll still help, reduce the amount of time that you're feeling the euphoria, and also reduce the strength of the euphoria as well. So CBD is kind of your fail-safe, and like Marc was mentioning, having the ratios and doing it on the front end, can help prevent it altogether, as long as that ratio is right, and you just scale up the THC very, very slowly.
Sure. Yeah, that's important. So again, the question is, how long does it take you to find your sweet spot? In my case, it took about 2 weeks to get there. Some people take a month, some people a couple days. I know that in the case of like Parkinson's patients, it could take as much as 3 months because of the condition that's out there. So it really depends on the condition. And again, use the resources available to you. Use your medical marijuana doctor, and use your dispensary to be able to help you be able to really land that bird, really be able to find that sweet spot and get it done. Let's talk a little bit about CBD. Let's talk about cannabis itself. Cannabis is broken down. Now, there's 450 medical properties to cannabis. This is not all the medical properties. This is just some of them, but it gives you kind of an idea of what CBD and the different components of CBD, THC and the different components of CHC, and what they actually do. And what's fascinating about using medical cannabis is 1 and 1 is 3, meaning that if you're using a CBD product over here for stress, for pain relief, for example, and you come over here and use a Delta 8 or a Delta 9 product, 1 and 1, you actually get it actually works better to be able to address anxiety, stress, and pain relief than if you use them by themselves, or the components by themselves, right, Alex?
Yes, sir. So these compounds are, medicinal compounds in and of themselves, with, the benefits that you see here in this wheel. And like Marc mentioned, these cannabinoids do work synergistically together. So all the science shows that, CBD works better with certain amounts of THC present. And likewise with THC, it works better with certain amounts of CBD present. And that goes for all the cannabinoids. There's actually a term called the entourage effect that relates towards all these being present in one product at a time and getting full plant benefits. But I also want to point out too that the individual terpenes, those are also individual medicinal compounds. And again, that's a whole nother layer that you throw in there that improves, the medicinal potential that you can receive from these products.
Yeah, take us through a few of these. There's a couple of them that you might want to point out: the CBGAs, the Delta 8s. Why don't you take us through a few of these CBGAs, that type of thing?
Yeah. I'll touch on a few of them. So first off, if it has an A at the end of it, that's just denoting the raw form of that cannabinoid. And a lot of times the raw forms actually can work on different receptors in the body outside of the endocannabinoid system. So if you have both the raw form and the activated form present, then that's 2 different receptors that one medicine is working for, which is almost unheard of in the pharmaceutical field. But ones to note are going to be, I like to touch on Delta 8 THC just because that's getting more and more familiar. Like in the over-the-counter market, you can start to find that at CBD stores or smoke shops. We actually carry a few products with it. We'll get into more of those later, but it's kind of like a tweener between THC and CBD. Then we also have CBN, which actually isn't on here. That's a very interesting cannabinoid that we actually showed in the chart that shows the endocannabinoid receptors throughout the body. CBN works on the CB2 receptors. It's by itself, it's a powerful potentiator of both cannabis products and pharmaceuticals, meaning if you take it regularly, then you'll notice that you don't have to take as much of your cannabis or your pharmaceuticals to get the same effects. And also CBN combined with THC is very, very good for sleep. And then one more I'll point out is CBG. It also helps with sleep, but it's really good for the GI tract and the gut. And also for me personally, products that are high in CBG, I tend to notice that they're a little bit lower on the euphoria scale, but that's a personal thing. You might not experience that. But yeah, there's numerous cannabinoids that we haven't even been able to study or isolate yet. So the sky is kind of the limit as far as the medicinal potential coming from these products down the road.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out there's 450 medical properties. These are just some of them. We could have a whole webinar just on the different medical components of cannabis, but don't get overwhelmed by this. We're letting you know that it's there. When you go to your dispensary, when you talk to the bud tender, they'll look at your medical record, they'll look at your recommendation, and they'll look at and they know their products, and they'll be able to say, look, out of our product line, here's what we recommend for your particular condition. And then it's a matter of the dosing method and that type of thing. So you don't have to really be an expert on this. That's not what we're trying to point out. We're trying to point out that this is the magic brought to you by people like Trulieve to be able to bring the relief that you need to your particular medical condition. Let's spend a moment and talk about Delta-8. It's kind of a hot topic right now. And Delta-8 can be found both in hemp and in marijuana. And they talk about it especially because it supposedly has no euphoric effect, but more importantly, you can buy it over the counter. But it's really good for anxiety. It's good for stress. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Delta-8.
Yeah, I actually, every time I've experienced a new Delta-8 product that we've come out with, I've actually loved it. You know, my personal feedback is, I think a lot of the science says that the Delta-8 is about half as euphoric as Delta-9 THC or typical THC. I have a THC tolerance that's much higher than my CBD tolerance, so I feel like it's a little bit less, but in either way, it's still got reduced euphoria, and we actually have it at convenient ratios that mix in either CBD or both CBD and regular THC to combine them so patients can feel different effects from it. So we've got a lot of variety of it, and none of our products are going to be even close to something that you would get over the counter without getting your medical card, just because our THC levels and potency is just a lot higher. As well. So I find that these Delta-8 products really kind of have a place in the sweet spot for a lot of patients that don't have a lot of past experience or exposure to cannabis. They're just a lot more kind of mellowed out, and I think it's a very important stepping stone when you're trying to start low and go slow, and you're very sensitive to THC.
I know that a lot of people know that you can buy Delta-8 products over the counter at stores. It's hemp-based product. It's not marijuana-based. I mean, Trulieve sells a marijuana-based Delta-8 product. Now, let's talk about hemp-based THC for a second. A couple of things that's important. Hemp does allow you to produce a Delta-8 product, which is great. And by law, it has to be less than 0.3% THC, which means it shouldn't really get you high. Although if you have a threshold where it's C8 to T8, you're very, let's just say you're sensitive to THC, you may feel something. What's interesting, and when I compare the stuff you buy over the counter to the stuff I get at Trulieve, the over-the-counter products are not regulated. What a lot of people ask is, what are the terpenes in there? Are they good products? One of the things you want to ask is, what's the quality control report? What report is out there that shows that you're building a quality product and there's not any mold, there's no pesticides, things like that that's in there. And what they'll find is that in many of the cases, these over-the-counter products don't have a quality standard, don't have any, because there is no regulation. They're being sold without any quality testing. Now, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad, but it does mean you don't know what you're getting. So you've got to be very, very careful. And we did a study where we looked at a lot of the CBD products that were coming out there, hemp-based CBD products, and we found the majority of them, what was in the bottle and what they claimed they could do, didn't match. And I'm not claiming that the CBD vendors are doing anything wrong. It's just that that industry is just not regulated, and by not being regulated, you don't know what's out there. If you really want to be able to address and solve your problem, I would go to a medical cannabis dispensary like Trulieve, because you have some very strict, first of all, you have very strict standards. Every product is tested at least 3 ways. We'll explain how you can find out where the tests are. But also what I like about the Trulieve products and the marijuana products is they'll take the Delta-8 product and they'll mix it, for example, with CBD products. So you can buy a 1-to-1 CBD Delta-8 product. You can buy a 1-to-1-to-1 product, which is CBD Delta-8 and Delta-9 product. And you call them Laughing Buddha and Pink Lemonade. Is that correct, Alex?
Yes, sir. Those are the 2 strains that we currently have in our Delta-8 products. We do rotate them from time to time, but they're always going to be pretty similar as far as the terpene makeup.
And I have to tell you, I am a huge fan of your Delta-8 products, because it's not just a matter of using the pure Delta-8 products. It's a matter of using, like I carry a pen that is the CBD Delta-8 product with me during the day, in case I have any issues. And also one of my favorites is the 1-to-1-to-1 product. I think you call it Laughing Buddha, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's great. You can't find that kind of a product over the counter, and you'll find there's a big difference. It's kind of the difference between beer and whiskey. Okay, you'll find that the hemp-based products you get are great from a beer standpoint. But if you really want to get some quality products, then you really got to step up to the marijuana-based products, and that's the primary difference that's there. And one of the questions people have is, well, the hemp-based products are going to be cheaper than the marijuana-based products, and in many cases, that's really not true. It takes 8 hemp plants to make 1 bottle of CBD oil, where it takes only about a half of a plant to make a marijuana-based product. So the amount of raw materials used to make a hemp-based product is much higher. So quality hemp-based CBD is more expensive than marijuana-based CBD. And that a lot of people don't realize that. And the other thing the other myth that will kind of bust that I think is important to bust is a lot of people will say, well, yeah, but I'll use a hemp-based product because it's 0.3 THC. If I get tested, it won't show up. That's not true. If you're using any type of a CBD product, even one that's broad spectrum that claims it has no THC in it at all, it will show up on a drug test. Is that right, Alex?
Yes, it's possible. Let's put it that way. You can take it off the table. Even certain topical creams are transdermal and can accumulate in the body. So that's definitely always going to be something that's going to be a question mark that you can't really take all the way off the table.
Right. So anyway, I thought I'd point out that there's a couple of myths that are out there, but I tend to lean towards the medical-based CBD, medical-based CBD products, especially in the Delta 8 category. I've tried both, and I found them to be much more effective to address my stress, anxiety, and also for pain. It makes a big difference. We talked about terpenes earlier, and there's about over 200 different terpenes in medical cannabis. We're doing a seminar on terpenes in about 3 weeks. So if you're interested in the subject, please join us. But rather than trying to go through all 200, I kind of took the top 6 that people will find, and a lot of the ones that are being used, especially recommended for anxiety and stress. So Alex, tell us about a couple of your favorites. I'll talk about a couple of mine.
Yeah, no problem. So like Marc said, these are going to be the most common prevalent terpenes in a lot of the products that you find. That doesn't mean that these are the only terpenes that will make up a certain strain profile, though. But these are definitely going to be very common ones that are found in prominent things in nature. I'd say some of my favorites are going to be the pinene and the linalool. Very different, opposite kind of effects that you'll get from these. The pinene found in pine needles, that's what the scent's very similar to. It has a lot of anti-anxiety, anti-inflammatory sort of benefits. It's a bronchodilator, but it can also sometimes, for people, it can exacerbate anxiety a little bit. So that's, again, with the sativa and indica stuff, something that you have to kind of keep in mind. And then linalool, that would be kind of a terpene on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's going to be more calming, more relaxing. It's found in lavender, which is obviously known to be very calming and relaxing. So this one's going to be a little bit better for sleep. It's also anti-epileptic, anti-inflammatory itself. So there's 2 there to look at that are very prominent and kind of opposites. One more that I'll point out before I hand it over to Marc is the myrcene. That one's prominently found in mangoes. And in fact, certain anecdotal evidence, like it says at the bottom, may suggest that eating a ripe mango prior to consuming cannabis can kind of extend the effects or intensify them a little bit. So something to keep in mind there when you're first starting out, if you're looking to experiment and find different effects from your products. Yeah,
a couple of things I'll point out. In the case of pinene, for example, pinene is great. It's really good for anxiety and stress, but also you have to be careful because it does help with memory. It brings back memories. And so if you're suffering from PTS, although they'll mention pinene, be careful if you're suffering from PTS, it may not be something that you want to take a look at. Find another terpene profile that's out there. One of the ones that I think that I really like is caryophyllene. Caryophyllene is a spice. You'll find it in black pepper. It's kind of a spicy, peppery type of aroma. Great for anti-anxiety, great for antidepressants, and it's used quite a bit in topicals. I know you will find it in some. You'll find it in a number of cannabis strains that you take for either vaping, smoking, or capsules. But also you'll find it in a lot of topicals. They use that's out there. And eucalyptol is also a very good one. It also helps, but eucalyptol is probably the one that's least known, but most effective. It helps not only with pain relief, anti-inflammatory, but also it helps decrease blood pressure. And that's something that's really that's in there. And there's some studies that have been done recently, and although they're preliminary, very positive results have come out that it really helps with the cognitive functions of dementia. So it's something that's been out there. And again, where does eucalyptol come from? You find it also in not only in medical cannabis, but you'll also find it has kind of a minty aroma, but you also find it in eucalyptus trees and bay leaves and things like that. So pinene, limonene, linalool, myrcene, caryophyllene, eucalyptol. These are kind of the top 6 that you'll find in most of the strains that are out there. And again, there's over 200 of them. We'll talk about more of these in our webinar in about 3 weeks, but these are kind of the hit parade of terpenes that are there. Let's talk about actual cannabis strains, and let's talk about the terpenes that are available to people that have anxiety and stress. I'm going to present 10 of them. You want to take a few of these, Alex?
Yeah, of course. So just like I was mentioning before, where different strains can be made up of the same terpenes, just in different amounts or ratios, and produce very different effects and flavors. This is a great chart to kind of highlight that, because you'll see the primary terpenes in almost all these strains are very similar. They all have myrcene, and they all have caryophyllene, and they all have pinene as well. Now, these strain scents and flavors, they're going to be very noticeably different, but also offer very varied effects, as you can see from the different comments, to where something like Granddaddy Purple, that's known to be an indica strain, THC dominant, very calming, peaceful. And then you have Jack Herrera, that's a sativa strain, still THC dominant, but sort of goes in the opposite direction. So same most prominent terpenes, but more than likely at very different ratios. So just goes to show, the same kind of compounds varied slightly can produce drastically different effects. And
what's interesting, if you look at all of this particular page, we have they all have the same terpene profile. They all use the same. They all have very similar terpenes. Mm-hmm. But they have different, because of the balance, the blending of the actual cannabis product itself. They have different effects that are there.
Exactly.
And I think especially in the case of people with anxiety, the AC/DC and I think the Canatu are the two that are probably going to help quite a bit.
Without a doubt, and that just goes back to the role that CBD plays and how important it is in reducing anxiety.
Right. There's other ones that are out there. We want to talk about a few of these?
Yeah, of course. 3 that we carry that are very popular, 4 are going to be the last 4, the Remedy, Sour Diesel, Girl Scout Cookies, and OG Kush. These are, very kind of old school type of strains and terpene profiles that have been used for medicinal purposes for a long, long time. And again, very similar terpene profiles, but drastically different effects. And if you're looking for probably the best strain on this page that's likely to help with stress and anxiety, or at least the place you should start, that's going to be with the Remedy strain, just because that's a CBD dominant strain, but it's going to have similar terpene profiles as the THC dominant strains. So you can get kind of like a window towards those other strains' effects without having to experience the high THC content.
Right. And I know OG Kush is also very popular for people that are suffering from stress.
Without a doubt.
That's out there. They're out there. So here's some of this different strains. So when you're talking when you're going into a dispensary and they're presenting you the different products, they'll be talking to you about these different strains and also the terpene profiles to go along with it. I know some people had questions about how do you know the terpene profiles of the product, and we'll address that in just a few minutes when we do answer some of the questions. But I think there's also dosing forms. I know that when I got involved in the business, I didn't think a lot of people would be sitting on their front porch with a fatty, taking medical cannabis, smoking cannabis. We've moved a long way from that. There's a lot of different ways of taking medical cannabis. You want to explain some of the alternatives that we have?
Of course. This is another kind of layer of confusion for a lot of new patients, just because there are a lot of different routes of administration, ways to consume, and a lot of different segments there. So there's 5 approved routes of administration through the state. Well, there was originally. So we had inhalation, oral, sublingual, topical, and rectal. And then throughout the evolution of the program, they added smokable flower as well as edibles. So as of right now, we have a very large diversity of products that are available in the markets, very similar to markets like Colorado and California. So we have pretty much everything, and it's growing by the day. So here's just a brief look at some topicals, gummies, chocolates, tinctures, and vapes. And we'll go into this more in the next few slides.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is there's a lot of different alternatives. I will kind of point out something, and that is that, well, let's use the next slide. We'll point it out there. Tell me a little bit about tinctures and tell me a little bit about vaping. Let's start there.
Yeah, so I like to kind of relate these two routes of administration to where inhalation is going to be similar to like a breakthrough medicine, meaning it's going to take effect very, very quickly, almost immediately to within 15 minutes to experience full effects. It can last anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. On the longer end, if you're sensitive and new, and on the shorter end, if you have a tolerance. Now, something like a sublingual or a oral or an ingestible.
Before you leave the vaping for a second, a lot of people are really can get confused between vaping and smoking cigarettes. There's no carcinogens in vaping. Vaping is more of a steam effect. Anything that goes into your lungs, you always have to be careful of. I don't want to give you an impression that it doesn't have some effect on your lungs, but the vaping is much easier on your body to be able to take in, and it doesn't have any of the negative effects that are out there. They kind of got a bad rap about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when there were some over the counter products brought in from Asia that were actually bad for you, killed a couple of people. That's unfortunate, because here in Florida, every vaping product, especially from the medical cannabis dispensaries, are really quality controlled. Is that right, Alex?
Yes, it is. Like we touched on earlier, we have third-party testing and certificates of analysis for any product that you could purchase from us. They're very easy to access as well. We have a QR code on the package that you can just scan with your phone, and you can pull it right up. It's got lots of pictures. It's got colors. It's easy to read. It's not just some super dry report with a bunch of numbers and words you can't read on it. So, you can rest assured that you know exactly what you're getting, and it's going to be free of any adulterants or intoxicants.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because they're safe. I know that what I do is when I wake up in the morning with 7 herniated discs in my neck, I can get a pain level as much as high as 8 on a scale of 10. And sometimes when I wake up in the morning, if I don't take my cannabis in the evening like I should, I will wake up in that pain level, and I can't function during the day. That just makes me I can't do my job. So typically when I get up, I'll take sublingual drops, take a couple drops underneath my tongue. And then the second thing I do is I then grab my vape pen and take 2 hits out of the vape pen. And why do I do that? Because the vape pen gets rid of the pain immediately. Literally within a minute or two, the pain goes away. And it's really interesting that for me, the first time that happened, it was like somebody took a rag, wiped my back, and the pain went away. I was just shocked. I told my wife, and even when it happened like this morning, it's the same thing. But I know also when I get anxious, I get stressed. I had to complete a test a little while ago. I'm taking a martial art. I had to go to get tested, and I had a little anxiety from that. I mean, it's a big test, and I know that a couple of hits from the vape pen just get me to just relax a little bit. Actually, helped me pass the test, which was great. So I think it's something you can mix and match these methods. That's what I'm trying to point out. You can mix and match the different tests that are out there. So tell me about tinctures.
Yeah, so building on what you said, Mark, I think in a perfect world, if you wake up with back pain, right, you'd want to use your vape to make it go away immediately. And you want to, then gravitate towards your sublingual tinctures or your capsules or edibles to help keep it away for an extended period of time. So as you can see with the edibles, tinctures, and capsules up here, the onset time is going to be pretty similar, where you can start to feel it, after about 15, 20 minutes in some cases, but you have to expect the full effects to take at least an hour to 2 hours to really kind of kick in there. So that's just really important in terms of dosing, because you want to wait that full hour and a half, 2 hours before you even think about taking another dose. Just because if you take them too close together, they can kind of run into each other, and then you sort of double dose yourself, and going to need to either buckle up or go reach for some CBD, because it's likely that that you'll get a little bit too much THC in there. But yeah, in a perfect world, the inhalation, use that as a breakthrough instant relief, and then your orals and sublinguals as a more extended relief. And you can use the vaping, kind of in between, depending on the day. If it's a rough day, you're in a little bit of extra pain, you can just use the vape a few more times to get you to your next oral dose.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that if you look at the duration effect, which is 4 to 6 hours, what happens is that when I take my sublingual drops in the morning, I know that it'll last. Let's say if I get up at 8 or 9 o'clock, it'll last till early in the afternoon. But by the middle of the afternoon, it'll wear off. So I really have to have a regime where I have a morning dose. I have a morning dose. I have an early afternoon dose, and I have an evening dose because my pain level just gets to be so high that if I don't do that, I just don't like living in pain, and I'm kind of not as reasonable as I want to be from being able to do that. So the regime, how often you take it is important. A lot of people say I take it once a day, and all of a sudden it doesn't work. Well, that's because it's the 6 or 8 hours have gone by and it's out of your body. Now, some people don't like tincture drops. You can still take capsules, right, Alex?
Correct, correct. And edibles are going to be very similar as well. And we've got all different kinds of edibles, whether it be gummies, chocolates, cookies, brownies. And we also have some alternatives to those as well. We have a powder that we make that's easily mixed in, drinks and smoothies and food. And then we also carry cough drops or lozenges as well. That's can all be very, very similar.
Right. And so what's interesting with the capsules is when you use the sublinguals, it's basically going under your tongue. It goes right into your bloodstream and tends to act a little bit quicker than the capsules. The capsules go into your stomach, and it actually burns off. Your stomach has to absorb the capsule itself. So you lose a little bit of the cannabis, but it also has a different way of absorbing into your body, and it becomes more effective. Is that correct, Alex? In fact, you have to be careful because you can take it. You can have more of a euphoric effect with capsules.
Yes, yes, that is correct. So there is another type of THC that we haven't talked about. It's actually the type of THC that gets created when typical THC passes through your liver and enters the bloodstream. It does get most of it gets destroyed, about 90% of it, but what's left over is 5 to 7 times more potent is in terms of the euphoric effects, and it's also a lot more efficient at passing through barriers and binding to receptors. So it's just really important to keep in mind that if you just take a capsule as opposed to a sublingual, it won't enter your bloodstream and start to bind to receptors until it's converted to 11-hydroxy. So that means it's going to feel, your experience will likely be that it's a lot stronger than if you had taken a sublingual and allowed some of the regular THC to absorb onto the tongue and then start to bind and fill up some of those receptors throughout your body before the liver, breaks it down and converts it, and then lets that go throughout the body. So it does change things, and that's why it's very important to kind of, take notes and know exactly what you're doing when you take it, and sort of journal so you can really hone in on that sweet spot faster rather than later.
It's interesting. You look at edibles and you look at capsules. They take anywhere. They take about an hour and a half to 2 hours to really work. There's the always famous stories, and I know a lot of people who, they take an edible, they take a quarter of a brownie, and it doesn't work, so they take another quarter of a brownie, and that doesn't work, so they take another quarter of a brownie. The next thing they do, they consume the whole brownie, and they've consumed 4 times the dosage that they should be consuming, and then they have a very high euphoric effect. I guess the answer is be cool. If it's not working after 30 minutes, just be cool. It will work, and it has to do with your body. And there's lots of stories about people that just don't have a lot of patience and keep pounding down the edibles, especially more than the edibles than the capsules.
Definitely, that can be an issue.
Yeah, tell me about topicals. Topicals are great. I know that I've used topicals on my neck. In fact, the only complaint I have is I've tried to buy a topical this week. Alex, Trulieve's out of topicals. You guys have sold out.
Yeah, it's kind of taken a bit for them to get a little bit of notoriety. They've kind of been hanging out out of the limelight, but they're coming on strong. The more people that try them and see how much benefits that they have. Personally, I was blown away by how well they work. I play hockey and stuff still, so when I get bumps and bruises and scrapes, this helps out. Just as much as any oral or sublingual or inhalation product that I could take. So it's just one more layer of medicinal benefits that you can get from a different product. And we have them in THC, we have them in CBD, and then we also have them in ratios as well. And they also come in patches, which are more long lasting. So there's a lot of options there and a lot of benefits. It's typically going to be localized relief, but if you do have pain and throughout the body, you can take, you can use a vape, you can take, take a capsule and use some tinctures, and then also use topicals. And kind of attack that pain from 3 different angles.
Right. I'm a huge transdermal patch fan. Lastly, let's talk about sprays and flour.
Yeah.
The sprays work almost instantly as well, right?
Yeah, certain sprays, which I think we'll get into later, they can have a little bit of a different technology to them, to where they can take effect faster, as well as some tinctures. But they work the same way as a tincture. It's going to be absorbed under the tongue and in the capillaries of the mouth. So it's going to be similar in onset and duration as a tincture would be. Now, smokable flour, that's going to be kind of a different ballpark, just because that is going to be something that is combusted if you smoke it. Now, you can take the whole flour home and you can put it in a whole flour herb vaporizer, and you can still vaporize whole flour and get those medicinal benefits without having to smoke it, combust it, and inhale carcinogens. But there are a lot of patients that, if they have cannabis experience, they're likely very familiar with smoking it. So it's kind of just easy for them, and it works. So why reinvent the wheel if it's still rolling, kind of thing, right? So it's a very popular route, and it is called smokable flour, but that doesn't mean you have to smoke it. And it does have full entourage effects, meaning nothing is isolated. It's going to have the exact properties and medicinal benefits of that plant that you're consuming. So
and I think a lot of people don't realize that one of the main uses for not the main, but one of the main uses for flour is cooking. People use it, in cooking and things like that. I know I put a little bit of flour in my coffee in the morning, and what's interesting, it triggers the CBGA, and THCA, and it really helps for pain and stress relief without getting high. It's really great.
Yeah, that's very true. That was where I was going next too, and to build on, putting the flour in your coffee, just to kind of give the audience an example, that would be a real good example of how to extract, like the CBGA and the THCA, the raw forms of those cannabinoids that have a lot less euphoric potential as well. So, even for new patients, if you want to make some flower tea, that can also be a great place to start.
Yeah, and and what's interesting is because the tea or the coffee isn't hot enough to trigger the delta-9, you don't have a euphoric effect.
Right. And it also works on different receptors too. I think the THCA works on your serotonin receptors, and it's also great for pain, nausea, headaches. Most of the stuff that THC is good for.
Sure. So let's just kind of wrap this up a little bit. Talk a little bit about dosing. I know that, again, I mentioned earlier, dosing is very much like alcohol. You have to find out what your tolerance is. You got to find out what works for you, for your particular condition, what you like and what you don't like. I mean, there's certain products that I really like. I like the Skywalker products. I think they taste great and they work great for me. And so this is something where you really got to find out what is your tolerance to CBD, what is your tolerance to THC. I know, and interestingly enough, some people can have a negative reaction to CBD. Is that correct, Alex?
Yeah, of course. Myself personally, I liken myself as being CBD sensitive, and I find that if I'm using like a pure CBD vape pen or something like that, it makes me sleepy, lethargic, and more relaxed than I want to be very, very quickly. So everyone's going to be different. That's some people like ratios, some people just like one or the other. You just kind of got to dip your toe in the water and find out for yourself.
Right. And again, you want to be able to experiment with it. You want to be able to find out if this works or if that works. One of the things I love about Trulieve is that if you buy a product and you try it, and let's say use it for 2 or 3 days, even if you use half the amount of the product is not working for you, you can take it back and exchange it. Is that right, Alex?
Without a doubt, and that's one of the things that sets us apart and kind of puts us in the spotlight as an industry leader, is because we stand behind all of our medicine. So we don't want anyone having to get out of the program before they find relief from natural holistic medicine. So if anything's not working, a patient doesn't like the taste, say the device breaks, even if you use all of it, you can bring it back to a store and we will work with you. We will swap it out for something else that hopefully does work free of charge.
Yeah. And I think that's really, really important. I think the bottom line, I'm going to wrap this up because I want to get into the questions, is you're in control using medical cannabis. You can control the amount of THC and the CBD that you're using. And so you're able to control your product. With a lot of the pharma products, you can't. And I know that this is something that's very, very important. More important than anything else, you're not going to get addicted. You can stop using cannabis at any point in time. You're not going to have withdrawals. You're not going to have any of the problems that they have with opioids and a lot of the pharma drugs. In fact, every 6 to 8 weeks, I actually take what they call a holiday. I'll take a day or two off just to be able to let my body reset, just to be able to let my endocannabinoid system that's inside my body really realize that you can't rely on the outside influences, and just kind of reset everything. And I don't have any withdrawals or anything from that. What I have after about the second day is my neck taps my shoulder and says, if you don't do something, pain's coming. So I'm more addicted to getting rid of the pain than I am medical cannabis. And you really can't overdose from it. There's been nobody who's ever died from medical cannabis. The CDC has been studying this for decades, and there's never been a reported death, both recreationally and also medically, of people dying from medical cannabis. Now, people have got high, people have had negative experiences by getting a high euphoric effect, but nobody's dead. We don't have the 22 people a day that are dying from opioids even today. And I think more importantly, it has what they call an entourage effect. And what that means is your body knows, because the endocannabinoid system is triggered by your nervous system, your body knows where the problems are in your body. And so what it does is it'll trigger a remedy for it. For example, my mother was taking medical cannabis to treat her breast cancer. And what she found out when she went to the glaucoma doctor is she got rid of glaucoma. And when she asked the doctor asked her what she was doing, she said, I'm taking medical cannabis. And he said, well, that'll do it. It's there. So your body doesn't need a doctor to tell it how to treat itself. It'll be able to treat itself that's out there. So that's kind of some bottom line issues that are there. Before we jump into a lot of your stuff, Alex, which we will in a minute, I want to answer just a few questions that I think are important to really set the stage for Trulieve. And Ansi, I love you. I think you had the question of the day for me. Your question is, this is my first time. I'm 77 and I feel guilty using cannabis. I have heard that a lot. We went through 5 decades of getting misinformation and being told that this was something bad, and you name it, we heard it. When I went to school, I'm a senior citizen. So when I went to school, I heard all the negative stuff that's out there. And then about 8 years ago, I went to help a friend whose daughters had cannabis, was using CBD and cannabis. And I found out that we've been lied to for 50 years. This was something where it is not going to hurt you. It's not going to kill you. It's not something that's out there. And that's why I got into the business. And that's why I put on we put on over 200 medical marijuana seminars and or webinars in the last 3.5, 4 years. You shouldn't feel guilty. You okay, so you're hoodwinked and you're not being hoodwinked anymore. This is something that you can be mainstream, and don't be afraid to tell your friends about it. I live in a community where when I first moved in here and they told people I was in the medical cannabis business, they thought I was Darth Vader. They thought that the guy had come in. When they found out I was using medical cannabis, they went to a couple of my seminars. In the community that I live in, there's over 188 people now using medical cannabis because they found out they had the same problems, and it's something that helps them. I cannot walk through a grocery store right now without being stopped by people who either say thank you or ask me questions about medical cannabis. So it's something that's become more mainstream, and don't feel guilty about what's out there. I think in anything, let your kids know that you're using it. In fact, they may help you answer a lot of those questions. Is there a couple of questions? I want to answer a couple of them real quick, and then we'll jump into Trulieve, if that's okay, Alex. One of them I want to answer is, Lee asked the question, what's your thoughts on Delta 10? Can I take that one? Do you mind?
Not at all. Go for it.
Delta 8 is one of the components of cannabis. So is Delta 10. There's Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10. Delta 8 is something that it gets you, it's actually very good for pain, stress relief, that type of thing. It's actually more for stress relief and anxiety than it is for pain. It does an okay job with pain. It's a calming effect. Delta 10 is exactly the same thing, but it's not calming. It's more of what I call the sativa strain, or sativa effect of that. In other words, it's more energizing. It gets you more energy. So where on one side you have a relaxing side, the Delta 10 is the same medical component, it addresses the same thing, but in this case, it gets you more energy, and it's out there. And that's the really difference between the 8 and the 10 that you find that's out there. Do you have any comments on that, Alex?
No, that's probably a little bit more in depth than I was even going to answer. So I think you stole the show there.
Yeah, but anyway, I think it's a good product, something that you may want to try. I know the hemp shops are now pushing it really hard. Delta 10 has been in a number of medical cannabis products for a long time. Again, there's what they call the popular discussion points. It's not been one that's been up there, but it's clearly something that's out there, and it's something to really take a look at. But I want to address that one because as we go through the Trulieve products, that'll come up. Delta 10 is in a number of the Trulieve products that are out there, and it's very effective. It's out there. They've just isolated it and made it available over the counter in a lot of the hemp shops that are out there. So why don't you tell me a little bit about Trulieve, Alex?
Yeah, of course.
I put this slide up here because I wanted people to see these are clean. These are not head shops. These are not you're not going to find Jamaican type colors flying around this place. This is like going to an Apple store. It's something that's very much almost like a high tech store when you go in.
Right. They're very clean cut, very organized, professional places. Our stores. Sometimes we have certain sales. They do known to get pretty packed sometimes, depending on your location. But that's why we're opening up as many stores as we can, because patient access has been our #1 priority since day one. So we're actually about to open up our 90th store in Florida tomorrow in Oviedo. So that'll be a fun time over there. We normally do nice giveaways and big discounts. So when you're a new patient or once you become a patient and you see grand openings, you definitely want to go check them out. Lots of fun stuff there. I was actually an employee with Trulieve for about 6 months before I got my card and went in and made my first purchase. And, I had a lot of preconceived notions myself, a lot of hesitations, and, all that definitely flew out the window after going and experiencing it for myself. So, like Marc said, this is helpful to kind of see what you're going to be walking into. It's not going to be some back alley corner type thing. We're in shopping plazas, right on main roads and things like that. So it's just very visible, very out in the open, and very professional.
My wife was kind of interesting when my wife went to the dispensary for the first time. She said, this is just like going into Cheekers or going into Macy's, into the cosmetic counters and things like that. Very professional people with a lot of very knowledgeable staff. But one of the things about Trulieve that I really like is you have a thing called nanotechnology. And that really separates your products from a number of the competitors that you have. Nanotechnology, explain what it is and how it really can help the patient.
Of course. So I touched on slightly earlier when we were talking about the different ways to consume, about there's some sublingual products that have faster onsets. And that was referring to these products that incorporate the true nanotechnology. So that's referring to nano-emulsified cannabis. And what that is we put the cannabis oil through a process known as sonification. So we blast it with sound waves to make the cannabis molecules as small as possible, which increases their bioavailability and basically their ability to pass through barriers a lot more easily, which increases the onset time, decreases it. So I guess the main takeaway is products that do incorporate the nano emulsification can almost be an alternative to vaping, smoking, or inhalation as a breakthrough medicine. So, if you, these products will be a little bit pricier than non-nano products, but if you're kind of hesitant or, a little bit averse to vaping because you're a new patient, don't have much experience, then the nano emulsified products are going to be where you want to go if you're looking for a breakthrough medicine. Okay, that's going to take effect very, very quickly. It's not going to last quite as long, but it does take effect very, very quickly. Now, we do have a few options, as you can see.
I think it's you point out something. Not only does it the onset time is shorter. In other words, they work a little bit quicker, but you typically take less product. That's what's important. I mean, when you do a comparison against, you say, well, it's a little bit more expensive, but you're not using as much product. I think it all comes out in the end. Right.
Exactly. Which is what I was going to mention here. We do have these in, high CBD and high THC varieties, our tinctures, gummies, and the true powder options. And like Marc said, since the bioavailability and absorption is that much higher, you will use less. So it's very important to keep in mind if you, say you're experimenting with a regular tincture and your dose is, 5 milligrams every 6 hours or so. If you get a nano product, you're going to want to probably cut that around at least in half, maybe even more, just because the bioavailability is double to triple what non-nanotechnology products are.
Yeah, exactly. And your true powder is great. I know I use it in smoothies and things like that. Now there's a minimal number of terpenes that are in it, but I do know it does really help a lot with being able to take take my medical cannabis without necessarily having to smoke or vape or something like that. I'm on a regime where I have some sort of a smoothie in the morning and one in the evening. I call it juicing. I don't call it smoothing because I'm more doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and the powder is actually very versatile too, guys. So whereas a tincture, you want it to absorb under the tongue, the powder you can kind of do, kind of vary it a little bit. If you want it to take effect faster, say as a breakthrough medicine, then you could mix it in a small amount of water and swish it in your mouth for about 60 seconds before you swallow it back. But if you don't need a breakthrough medicine and you want to be more of a long-lasting type of medicine, then you can do what Marc does and kind of mix it in a smoothie and just drink it down slowly over a little bit of time. Then the onset won't be as fast, and the intensity of the effects will be reduced as well.
You can also put it in in your coffee, water, and things like that, right?
Yes, we do have a vanilla cream option that's great for coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about your ratio product. This is where the Delta 8 products come into play. Your True Pods. This is your Laughing Buddha, your pink lemonades. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. We actually are running a big sale today. If anyone out there is a patient, we're doing 40% off oil products today, and that does include the Delta 8 line. But we do have, like we touched on, we do have different ratios here. We have the 1-to-1, which is just CBD and Delta 8, and then we have the 1-to-1-to-1, which is going to be CBD, Delta 8, and Delta 9. So we have one that's milder and one that's going to pack a little bit more punch. We also have carry these products in a oral sublingual type of syringe. And then we also have them in gummies as well as capsules. But I do want to point out that we also have CBN ratio gummies available. And if you remember earlier, I mentioned that those can actually, or CBN can be a THC alternative by itself, but combined with THC, it's great for sleep. So that's why we have it at a ratio in a gummy where you get 5 parts THC to 1 part CBN. And those are going to be fantastic for sleep if you're looking to get some better sleep.
And some people that are THC, have a problem with THC, they can get the CBD CBN product, and it's great for anxiety, stress, and pain, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about pickup and delivery. One of the things I love, I'm a senior citizen, I can order and you deliver, which is great.
Yeah. Yep, and then if you're 65 and up, then we won't ever charge you a delivery fee. And also, if your orders are over $200, you won't get charged a delivery fee either. But if you don't hit any of those things, delivery is just $15. I did mention that our stores can get kind of busy sometimes, have a little bit of longer wait than a lot of our competitors. But that's why we have the expedited pickup process, as well as that delivery process if the store is not nearby. It's very easy. If you order delivery, a lot of stores are able to do same day delivery now if you get the order placed by noon. But in most cases, as long as the order is placed by 2 p.m., it's not too hard to get it next day. Now, when you pick up from the store, that's a really convenient process because we've added a system that allows you to check in online before you're even at the store. So if there's a long wait, you can check in ahead of time while you're driving there. Or if, say, you're at home, you want to just check the wait to see, how many people are there, you can kind of check yourself in, see how many people are waiting, and then check yourself back out, and then maybe go at a different time or check later. So very convenient options to kind of get around the crowds and just have your medicine brought right to you in a convenient manner.
Yeah, you've done a great job of being able to manage that, because some of the stores get really busy, especially when you run sales like you're running today, to be able to pick things up. But I really like that. Again, as a senior citizen, I love your free delivery. And really, your cost for delivery isn't very expensive.
No, not at all. I mean, if the closest Trulieve is more than 30 minutes away, I mean, the gas money and the hassle, it's almost well worth it. And also do want to point out, guys, that if we do have like a 1-day sale like we're doing today, if you are a patient and you place an order for delivery today and it's not going to get delivered till tomorrow, you still get the sale that's happening today.
Right. It's out there. Great. You have discounts. So tell me about discounts, which is we all love.
We do. There's, it's kind of a common misconception that, Florida's market can be a little bit pricier than, other established markets. And I just don't feel like that's true. We offer too many discounts, loyalty programs, new patient discounts. For instance, you'll see in the sheet on the right, in the left column, you'll see a $75 off ID card renewal. That's Trulieve's way of refunding every patient's costs for the $75 state fee they have to pay every year. So that by itself is huge. Veterans get 20% off every order. You get a 25% off one-time coupon every month every year for your birth month. And then see, we have Senior Sundays where seniors get an extra 10% off any orders on Sunday. And we actually just changed our new patient discount. So this flyer is, as of today, outdated, but our new first patient discount is half off your first order. It used to be 15% off your first order. Now it's half off, and there's no limits. So if you aren't a patient yet and are thinking about becoming one, that first order will be quite discounted for you. And also, we do send out text alerts as far as new product sales and inventories. We typically only send out one text a day, sometimes less. But you can sign up for the store that's nearest you, so you're not bombarded with tons of texts. You just get the ones that relate to you in your area. But that's going to be the best way to kind of stay up on top of things, because, like I said, we do tend to kind of be the busiest dispensary around, and when we do have products that are in high demand or running large sales, they do tend to sell out pretty quickly. So it's invaluable to know when those products are coming in, so you can get on an order before you miss out.
Great. So let's get into the questions, because I've got some great questions that are out here. First one from Frank is, how about using a one-to-one blend of CBD and THC for anxiety and stress? Do you want to address that one?
Yeah, of course. That everyone's going to be react a little bit differently. There's a lot of variables to consider, biological, environmental, like your symptoms. So that's a one-to-one is always, a decent place to start.
It's kind of the starting point for a lot of people.
Right.
For most people.
Right. Unless you are very hesitant or fearful of the euphoric effects that come from THC, and one-to-one's a great place to start. If you do have, a little bit of fear of, over medication or being too euphoric, then you can start with a, one-to-one Delta 8 in CBD, or the one-to-one-to-one. So there's definitely options, but that would be, a great starting point. You still just want to, when you're dosing, just still remember to start low and go slow.
Frank, what you'll probably find is if you have anxiety and stress, you can start with a one-to-one. It's something, if you're new to medical cannabis, you'll find out where your THC tolerance is, but you'll probably increase the amount of CBD versus THC that you're using. You'll probably move to a 4-to-1 or an 8-to-1 ratio. But when we say 4-to-1, 8-to-1, that's 8 CBD to 1 THC versus 1-to-1. You'll probably find those are going to be a little bit more effective, and try them. Again, every person's body is a little bit different, but that's an alternative to take a look at. And it's most of the time, that's the way people hit it. So not a bad place to start. And again, pay more attention to if it's working. Your body will tell you if it works. And if it's not completely working with you, I would say try a higher ratio of CBD to THC product and see how that works. That's a good way to start. Howard was asking, are there any long-term medical studies on how you can point to, let's see, any long-term medical studies you can point to that support long-term relief for stress? You want to talk? Actually, let me take that one. The answer is there's a number of studies. Now, let me say that with a caveat. Here in the United States, cannabis is a Schedule I drug. Therefore, that means it has no medicinal purposes, and so you cannot study medical cannabis here in the United States. So there's almost, in fact, I'd say there's very few, if not any, of these studies that are US based. Now, we, meaning you and I, our tax money has been funding research for medical cannabis since 1964. Let me say that again. Our tax money has been funding medical research study since 1964. And because it was an illegal drug here in the United States, we funded it in Israel. And we built a whole Israeli industry. You probably heard of Dr. Raphael Mershulam. He was a gentleman and for 5 decades, he's been studying and putting out not only information on medical cannabis, but he's grown a whole industry around that. And so there are studies. In fact, you will find in the follow-up that we have, we'll give you some articles that actually are some medical studies found in the journal. Here in the United States, we have a thing called PubMed. And PubMed is where studies are put, medical journal studies are put in there. One of the things about funding Mershulam was he had to publish a lot of his studies in PubMed. And so you will find in PubMed studies on relief and medical cannabis. But again, you'll find them all done overseas. But they're very effective. I mean, I lived in Switzerland for a number of years. I lived in Europe, and I think their medical studies and the way they handle the act medicine is much better than the way we handle it over here. They're much more precise and they're much more thorough. But again, that's a personal point of view. But there are studies, and yes, we'll get you some of those studies that are out there, and there is evidence on that. You want to take Ellie's question, Alex? Can you see Ellie's question? There's a
Yeah,
specific,
yeah.
is there a specific non-smoking or vaping product from Trulieve that addresses anxiety?
That's a great question, Ellie. And cannabis is unfortunately just this type of medicine, like we discussed earlier. It's not like a take two of these and call me in the morning. So and also with the limited studies too, it's kind of difficult to really formulate just one product that's going to be good for everyone for one thing, just because there's so many variables, especially individual variables that are hard to understand and account for when really looking at the effects people receive from the same type of product. So but what I would say is, like we've already mentioned, any one-to-one products that's in tincture form, maybe like an edible form or a vaping form, something that has Delta 8 in it, or one of those ratio products, they're all going to be, great places to start. Just always important to start with a low dose and ramp it up slowly, and start with higher CBD applications or ratios, especially when you're looking to treat something like anxiety.
Right. And I think a lot of your, again, the person, your consultation and also your bud tender will help you identify those products for your particular condition. Right. You want to take the next one from Kelly?
Sure thing. Let's see. I'm a frequent user of both flower and edibles, some CBD, but I'm curious about the weed decease. What does that mean, you think? The weed decease?
I don't know. That's kind of interesting.
If you're still on, Kelly, if you could elaborate. Oh, I see. From Kelly, spelled it wrong. Oh, okay, gotcha. Clarified in chat already. Let me look for it. Oh, gotcha. Sometimes when you smoke stronger indicas, you get sick.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think it's the same thing you have. How tolerant you have. You're sensitive to CBD.
Right.
A lot of indicas are CBD based or CBD high in CBD.
Right. So it's there's a lot of factors. So if it's kind of difficult with just one thing that made you sick, because there's nothing to kind of compare it. Like if two products kind of made you feel the same kind of negative effects, you could look at similarities between those products and start to kind of isolate certain things they have in common that might be kind of leading to those effects. But with just one time, I'm not really sure what exactly could be causing that. But like Marc said, it could be the CBD. Maybe it's just you're very sensitive to it, or the opposite direction. You're going to kind of probably have to experiment a little bit more to get a little bit deeper look into that.
I would say also try a hybrid. In other words, go away from just the indica leaning stuff. Go to more of a hybrid. Go to more of a one-to-one, or even try a sativa leaning thing and see how that affects you. Because that might have something. Again, it might have to do with your own biology that's right out there. That is not an uncommon condition, but again, it's something to pay attention to and to try some things that can help you get around that. You want to let's see. Nancy had a question. What happened 8C?
You go to a state where it's not legal.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's a great question. And on the technical level, if you say cross state lines with medical cannabis products that are legal in Florida and say illegal in another state, there is a risk there, without a doubt. So it's one of those things where it's how much I guess risk is worth it, for your conditions and whatnot. I mean, I know tons of patients that they're here seasonally, and they live more regularly in another state that doesn't have a program, and they come here just to get their medicine and they take it back home. Now, is there a risk in doing that? Absolutely, but for them, the benefits outweigh the risk. So that's going to be kind of a tricky one. You have anything to add on that, Marc?
Yeah, it's cannabis is like alcohol. It's each state has different rules for alcohol. Same thing with cannabis. Each state has different rules for cannabis. 33 states it's legal, but there's really only about 27 states that have active programs, meaning they may have made it legal, but they haven't set up the infrastructure. Like, for example, places like Georgia is still in the process of setting up all the infrastructure on how that program is going to work. But what's interesting is that if you take it outside the state, there is a risk. I mean, my wife and I we live in Florida. We love to go to Biloxi and Gulfport to do some gambling. My wife loves the slots. And it's not legal in Florida. Actually, it's legal in Florida, but it's not legal in Mississippi. It's not legal in Alabama. And I really don't want to get the ambiance of an Alabama state trooper and talking to him about cannabis. That's not going to be a positive experience. Now, so what do I do? Well, I typically, I either do one of two things. I either illegally take it, which is something I really don't like to do, or I basically have to abstain. That's what I call my quiet period. That's where, remember I mentioned, I told you I'd take a day or two off. That's where we go up there for a couple of days. I take my day or two off, and that's what I use that for. Now, in states that it is legal, let me talk about California. My family's from California. I'm going to California at the end of September. My mother's 93rd birthday and my uncle's 90th birthday, so we're going to go celebrate that. What I will do is I will leave my medical cannabis here, and when I get to California, I'll purchase the products in California and use it out there. A sidebar note: people tell you that cannabis in Florida is more expensive than outside. That is absolutely not true. I buy tinctures and gummies and things in California, and they're between 10 to 30% higher than here in Florida. I can tell you across the board. There's been a lot of arguments about that, and I've got the receipts to show it. It is not cheaper in those states. Now, the illegal markets, the street markets, always are going to be cheaper, but God knows what you're buying. Let's put it that way. I need medical cannabis that I know works every day and is safe to take. My risk of my health is not worth the dollar or two that I'm saving. That's my opinion. Okay. But I think that what I do is I tend to, now my mother is taking medical cannabis, which is odd. Nancy, you may relate to this. Her mom used to tell me, marijuana is bad and it's not there. Well, my mom is now calling me when she was diagnosed with breast cancer as to what to do. And I jokingly say I'm her supplier. Let's put it that way. Not really giving her products, but a recommendation. So I call her up and I tell her what I need, and she picks it up for me, and I have it where out there. And that's what I do for states that it is legal, and you can find out that's out there. I know one person said, "What do I do if I'm Canadian?" Well, first of all of the principles, what we talked about here, the strains, how it works, the different vaping methods, all of that, it doesn't make any difference if you're here in Canada. That all applies. What does apply is because there's a different set of rules and regulations in Canada versus here. It's like another. Don't please. I lived in Canada for 5 years, and I carry a Canadian passport, so I am sensitive to the Canadian thoughts of the United States. You're not really a state, but it's a different medical cannabis program, and so the strains are there, the programs are there. But unfortunately, the products like Trulieve is not in Canada, so that's not going to relate over. But the rest of it also work pretty carefully. Let's try the next one. How do you know what terpenes are in a specific product? Most dispensaries don't make their terpenes public. That is an excellent question, Ellie. How do I find out what terpenes are in my product, Alex?
Great question. So like I touched on earlier, Ellie, any product you buy, we do have to put a sticker on it that has the CBD and THC content. We also have a little QR code. So I'm going to show you one right here. So this is the top of a flower container that I purchased. And that QR code, you can scan it and it'll take you right to your internet browser on your phone with the batch number searched in Google. And if it doesn't take you to the Trulieve website, then you can just copy that batch number and put it in on our website where we have the COA search bar. So it's the search bar to search for your batch number and pull that lab report. And once you pull the lab report, it shows you the exact breakdown of terpenes. So it shows you the percentage of each terpene in the terpene profile and how much by weight of each terpene is present in that strain.
Yeah, great. I'm going to jump into a question that Kelly Everett asked, and this is, do I need a doctor's approval to get a card? Well, here in the state of Florida, a medical doctor has to look. Florida has a number of conditions that you can get approved for medical cannabis. And what's interesting is it requires you to go to a doctor. There's medical marijuana clinics. I think earlier in the program, I mentioned the medical marijuana clinics of Florida. You get a 10% discount, mmtcfl.com. Or there's an 800-850 number that we have that will send to you. And you can call them and get an appointment. You can meet with the doctor. You bring in your medical records and he'll be able, or give him access to your medical records, and he'll be able to qualify you for medical conditions. One of the most important things that Florida has done correctly is that if you have a condition that is not in the listed 13 that listed in Florida's medical conditions, your doctor can prescribe medical cannabis for a similar or like condition. So for example, I have a lot of chronic pain and it's not on the list, but it actually falls into the MS category. So the doctor, they've given the doctors the leeway to be able to take a look at your particular condition and to be able to prescribe medical cannabis rather than trying to publish 300 or 400 different conditions and try to keep up with that. They just gave it to the discretion of the doctors. So yes, you do need a doctor's approval. What the doctor does, the doctor tells the state, yes, you qualify, you have that condition. They actually put you into what they call the state registry, and then they actually give you a recommendation. And that recommendation is what the dispensaries look at to be able to recommend the products that you should be using. So the answer is yes, it's there.
Yeah, I probably have a personal example that'd be really helpful for Kelly. So when I first got my card, I went and saw a doctor that kind of put me through on PTSD without a prior doctor's I guess certification of that. And then when I went to another doctor, they did the same thing, but instead they took my prior diagnosis from a previous doctor of ADHD and used that to put me through on the condition K, which is like and similar, like Marc is mentioning. So there's multiple ways for doctors to kind of skin that cat, I guess, if you will. And it kind of just is up to them as far as, how knowledgeable and experienced they are, and as well how they prefer to run their cannabis practice. So there's, a lot of different clinics, they do different stuff, but they can push it through. And like Marc said, he's a great resource for that kind of stuff.
Right. So Nadine asked the question of how do I request a consultation?
That's a great question. So you can actually do it from our website. And I see that Ellie actually had an issue getting hers scheduled. I know Haines City, the Davenport store, they did have some issues with their virtual consultation program going live recently. So that might have something to do with it. But there's actually a link on our website. If you go to the tab that says for patients, it'll drop down and you can click on it there. Or if you go to our locations, on our locations page, each location has a link where you can sign up for a virtual consultation at that location.
Yeah, and Nadine, if you have any questions, or Alex, if you have any questions about that, we'll provide Alex's email address. You can email him directly, and he'll help you resolve that particular
Right.
issue.
At the very least, guys, you can have a 30-minute virtual consultation with me. You can give me a call.
Yeah, we want to make sure that I think Trulieve wants to make sure you have a great positive experience, and we'll make Alex's email address available to you. So, and sorry for the negative that's out there, but we'll hopefully get that solved.
Yeah, we'll take care of. Sorry about that, Ellie.
Yeah. It says, Kelly Everett asked a question, how much does it cost to be able to get approved? I know that in the case of MMTC of Florida, Florida requires you to take visit a doctor every 6 months. So for the first half of the year and the second half of the year. Rick Scott was, when he put the program together, wanted to make it as expensive as possible. I know you don't want to hear that, but that's reality. And so you have to visit a doctor twice a year. Like my herniated discs are going to go away 6 months from now. It's kind of interesting, but really the real reason that a lot of the doctors want to visit you is to make sure you're getting your dosing correct. It's out there. Typically it costs you $200 every 6 months for the doctor's consultation. And then it costs you $75 in order to get a card, the actual card from the state. So all told, it would be around $500. And again, we have that discount code for the doctor's visit that you can apply to that. There's no discount for the state registry fees that are there. You will find there are going to probably be a lot of doctors that you look at that will offer cheaper fees. The problem that you have is that in the case of MMTC, they have a dosing center where you can actually contact them. They have online, and also you can call into them and they'll help you with your dosing. A lot of medical cannabis doctors, especially the smaller firms, they're trying to visit the patients, and so they can't help you with your dosing. And so you're getting not just a doctor, but you're getting some additional benefits like dosing and discounts off CBD products and things like that from MMTC that you're not getting from other doctors. But it's your choice, please. That's out there. That's over there. Hopefully that answers that question. Kelly asked one more question. What's best for sleep? CBN and what? What's best for sleep, Alex?
CBN and THC in combination. So like we mentioned earlier, CBN, it can be a THC alternative used by itself. Okay, it can help with some pain, with some toned down euphoria, but to really activate the sleep potential, you're going to want to combine it with some THC. So like that ratio gummy we have, that's 5 parts THC and 1 part CBN. That'd be a perfect example.
Great, great. And yes, the answer is yes. So, and I know that it's a sleep product that I take it does have THC in it. It has CBN in it, and it works great. And in my case, because I have my herniated discs, if I just tried to sleep by myself, I'd be up most of the night just because of the pain. So it's things that are out there. Let's see. For anxiety, should I use more CBD than THC? What's your thoughts on that?
That's going to be one of those questions that's going to be impossible to really answer until you kind of get your feet wet, get some experience, and kind of test out your own sensitivities. But with the kind of mantra being to start low and go slow, then you definitely want to start with more CBD or higher CBD concentration ratio products. So if you're just starting out, you want to be more CBD heavy, and as you kind of work your way up, titrate up your doses, you can incorporate THC and then incorporate more THC if the CBD isn't doing it by itself.
Right. Yeah. So the answer is yes. Linda asked a great question. Are Florida medical marijuana cards honored with out-of-state programs? The answer is yes. I know that when I take my card to California, the benefit of having a medical marijuana card to California is you don't pay that 35% sales tax. And so I'm actually able to present my card, and California does honor Florida cards. Florida doesn't honor anybody else's card. Okay. So we're not reciprocating. Be careful of that, because if you get a card from another state, unfortunately the state hasn't quite worked out the kinks in that particular program yet. But the answer
one other added benefit is a lot of times in those states, if you don't have a card, then you do kind of have to you don't get as large of amounts that you can purchase. I know it's probably similar in California as it is in Colorado. But yeah, you do get to escape some of the taxes and some of the quantity limits, but not all other states have reciprocity, and we don't have reciprocity with any states because our program and our database, it's too complicated for out-of-state people to come in. But that's a whole other topic.
It's a whole other issue that's out there. And the last question I'll take is from Kelly. Would you be available to speak with a Canadian? The answer is absolutely.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And you can even schedule virtual consultations as well. And if you have any issues, just like Ellie did, you're going to get my email address. I'll share my phone number with you guys, and you can feel free to reach out, and we can have a 30-minute talk whenever you guys want.
So Alex, I think we answered all the questions, and I think we covered most of the subjects. And I want to thank everybody for really a lot of great questions, and for your time. It's gone a long time, an hour and 43 minutes. Final thoughts, Alex?
Great audience. Thank you so much for being here, guys, and asking really great questions, because even if if you have that question, the chances are that someone else has that same question is very high too. So hope you guys got a lot of info out of this. And like I said, if you guys have any issues, questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'll do it. Everything I can to help you out.
Yeah, and I think it's important that medical cannabis should be part of a lifestyle that you get into. Pay attention to your diet, pay attention to your basic self-care, work with qualified medical professions. You're dealing with a lifestyle medical condition that's really not fun. And so stick with the professionals, they can help you. I know there's sometimes people try to cut corners, but I know that with my health, I'm not trying to ruin the bank, because I have to worry about a budget like everybody else. But I do want to make sure that we do pay attention to the fact that you need quality tested products. And I can't say that enough. In this industry, that's one of the problems that are out there. So thank you very much for everybody for attending. We really appreciate it. I'm going to give you, in 2 weeks, or actually next week, we have a seminar on edibles. We'll send you our schedule for next quarter. We have some very fun topics. We have edibles. We're talking about terpenes. We're talking about sleep and dosing. So there's a number of great topics in our seminar series next quarter. We do it every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. And again, thank you all. We really appreciate you all for tuning in. Thank you, Lee, in the background, our moderator, who's been helping me. She's really the one who makes this whole thing happen. And Alex, thank you very much. Thank you, Trulieve, for sponsoring, and thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And you have a great evening, and have a great Labor Day weekend. Thank you.